would say to you is, do we need to think more carefully about how those rules are designed? And I think you've talked about that. Perhaps approaching this a little differently now.
So let me. I was describing what the regulatory response is currently under as it's being developed. But let me actually confirm your point to show just how difficult it is to think from that. I was simply trying to explain to people what the process is unfolding. But to your point, do you then look at a Bitcoin as an asset, as a property, right? Sounds interesting enough. Well, then that means you would have to figure out a way to tax any appreciation of a Bitcoin at any given point in time where there is a very wide fluctuation, right? So when, for example, the IRS makes its release of saying, okay, we need to go and tax Bitcoin, everyone's saying, well, in a system where there is a large degree of pseudonymity, not to mention there are wide fluctuations on a daily basis as to the value of a Bitcoin, not to mention you'll be able to write it off, or you can't write off any losses, but you'd be only taxed on the gains. That doesn't seem like a very viable approach to always.
They're looking at it like you would look at a commodity, like wheat or soybean or something like that.
Precisely,
right.
Precisely. And so there's this question as to how viable or how exactly would the IRS do this. Yep. When you talk about the international aspects, for example, Germany will, I believe, and I'm talking later today with the head of the German BaFin, but has called this stuff a digital commodity, whatever that is. On the other hand, some countries have decided to call it a currency, which obviously gets your banking regulators involved. The SEC is worried about fraud. To the extent to which every nation state, and this is again to your point, tries to come up with an approach that is where the market and technology has outpaced the regulatory infrastructure, you're not going to always end up with the optimal results. And one of the challenges, and what I argue in my book about minilateralism, is this need to sort of update both how financial market participants and authorities talk to one another, even across national boundaries. I will say one last thing, though. Depending on the size of the Bitcoin market, right, that's where you have certain kinds of issues. As I always tell my students, always remember this. You too, young man. I love the fact that I can say young man. It's been great.
I'll write it down.
Yes.
Cheese?
Cheese?
How do you spell that?